Yeah, I'm going to tell you a bit about my experiences here. Let's just start that off. We're all experts at what we do in our particular industries, and I think what's exciting is that whether you're in a startup mindset or in a large financial institution, what brings us together here is testing, of course, and there are many similarities, right, between our industry. We may do things slightly different from industry to industry, different challenges, but at the end of the day, testing brings us here, and that's really what I want to focus on. Why don't we introduce myself? So yes, 20 years. I started as a software developer, graduated back in '97, and in '99, I was offered a role overseas in Germany to run a testing group. So I decided to take it. Now, I'm not sure if I was at the time just a bad developer and they wanted to move me into something different, or I certainly look at it as an opportunity for me to see more of the world. I'll get back to that point because it's kind of important to what I wanted to say. I put innovation purposely in quotes because I believe a lot of the innovation driving software development is rework of past practices. We'll get a bit more into that. What's the difference between innovating something and just taking what we know and applying it to a certain problem? And there are key differences. It may not be terribly relevant, right? But we'll get a bit more into that over time. What else do I have up here? I did not write the book on innovation. Of course, this is actually my first presentation on innovation, so forgive me. But I do have some thoughts, as Anna had mentioned in my introduction. I've been in telecommunications, market data, banking industries. I've managed teams of 4, I've managed teams of 250, 300, and the dynamics are very different across the different, but the problems are the same. It's just different sizes of scale. All right, let's go. Let's try. Thank you, Chairman. Again, this is my view of this is from my point of view, some of the challenges that we have faced as an industry over time. My observation is that over time, test organizations are more likely to struggle to stay ahead of innovation. And there's a number of reasons why. Follow the lead of the teams that we support. We typically take direction from others. There's no real reason for that, other than we're kind of, as an industry, I feel, more accustomed, maybe more comfortable in those situations. We have competing stakeholder commitments and BAU support activities that we have to maintain. We have no incentives of Sorry, this is my first time working with one of these. We have competing stakeholder commitments. Yeah, I just said that. No incentives or perceived value to change. Testing sometimes is an afterthought to our organizations. And then, of course, cultural fears and misconceptions. As test leaders, we need to remind ourselves that we are the authorities of testing and validation for our development groups. It's a real position of empowerment, right? We want to try to steer away from just simply following someone else's lead, and we want to be able to drive the discussion of testing across our organizations. We're equal partners at the table when it comes to software development. We're not just that support function. And I think one of the key things to getting ahead of innovation is a mindset, is a shift in the way that you think of this problem, right? If you lead by example, if you lead and you keep pushing forward, you will be, your views will be more widely accepted. Let's move on to the next slide. All right, so innovation changes the landscape of what we do, not necessarily simply how we get our jobs done. There's some things that, there was a previous comment about waterfall and agile, and sometimes if teams don't do it correctly, you're simply taking a waterfall best practice and applying it to some new textbook style of operation, right? And the only people who will know this and call this out are the people who are very comfortable and understand the SDLC with some strength, right? If you simply move a tester from a centralized team and embed them into a dev team, does that necessarily make you agile, or is that simply still a waterfall model of operating? And some dev teams get away with that, right? The true ones that excel are the ones that see beyond that and really morph and change their roles. Some of the key, some of the things that I think are more innovative would be open source, virtual machines, continuous delivery. Those are practices that have changed the way that we deliver testing, right? It's not just simply how we get our jobs done faster. Like there's some automation technologies that simply get us done or get things done faster. That to me isn't so much innovation as things that change the dynamics, the landscape of what we do. New shiny things often are recycled best practices. That's a line I took from Anna. The shiny things. And I firmly believe that we have to have a mastery of the SDLC principles to help us apply. Sorry, it's okay. I'll just stay here. Probably best. Mastery of SDLC principles will help you apply best combination of practices to problems rather than the process drives you. So again, the more that we know about how to develop software, we will be able to drive best practices as opposed to let the best practices drive us. To stay ahead or keep up, we need to understand what drives the need to innovate and anticipate its arrival. So organizationally, one thing that you'll hear from me time and time again is that we have to align ourselves better to organizational goals. Right? If your organization, and I'm not just talking about us as testers, but the big firm as a whole, if our drive is to do this, we have to make sure that we're doing all we can organizationally to align to that best practice, not fight it. And the way that we do that, or that organizational goal rather, and in order to innovate, we have to stay ahead of what we're currently doing now in order to support our larger organizational goals. So basically, in essence, right, we are testers, but we need to think about the software development lifecycle in its most simplest forms, right? Planning, analysis, design, implementation, verification, maintain. Now this could vary, right? My view or my belief here may be slightly different than yours, but in a sense, right, no matter how often the technology may change, or the way, the means of testing will change, these remain core to building software. And you have to understand, in my estimation, what these are all about and where we fit as an organization into each one of these steps. And then we try to fix and solve and deliver solutions that address problems in each of these different phases of the software evolution, software lifecycle. Additional factors. Identify shared organizational goals that you wish to influence. You need to be relevant and construct impactful goals, problems to solve. Innovating test coverage or decreasing release cycles along the way sometimes just isn't enough. What is our purpose? What is our value? Where do we fit in the software development lifecycle? We have to, I think sometimes test organizations struggle in that we're so focused on really just our own world, right? How much faster can we deliver the regression without actually analyzing, well, how much it's going to cost to build the automation and how many virtual machines we need in order to run it and how often we have to then correct the breaks that happen along the way, right? We need to look bigger picture. That may not be the optimal solution. We may have to try to transition more and more testing into the development organization as opposed to throw more assets, resources at trying to solve, the traditional operating model of testing. That, to me, is very core to what we have to do in order to succeed. We can't just look at what we're doing and just try to make what we're doing better. We have to look big picture and try to figure out best practices that will address the larger problem. So here's a particular case study. This is something Joe and I worked on a few years back. Market data company. So the problem statement was the business was unable to turn around change quick enough to meet client demand and a growing business. This was a kind of a startup-y sort of firm. And Joe and I, and a few other people, not in this room, but a few other people, were part of the QA group. And you know, organizationally, we were a startup company. We were moving fast. We needed to get more releases out the door faster and with better quality. Now, we identified the root cause in this particular case is limited test environments. We only had so many test environments, and we needed to, there was often contention, you know, from one environment to the next. And then there was a long resolution of defects. So when we did have those environments, we struggled to get the, I need to come closer. When we do get the environments, we tended to struggle to fix and then retest these issues. Now the SDLC tie-in here, which is important, is that we were looking to change the way that we implement and the way that we verify software. Our approach was to virtualize test environments and introduce paired development testing with full automated regression capabilities. This wasn't something that happened overnight. We conducted a POC, a proof of concept, that in short, you know, we virtualized our test environments into just a snapshot in time, full functionality of the system. This is a market data system, so it's data in, data out. And we virtualized it, I think it was VMware at the time, and put that on every tester's desktop. Then we told our development people to come on over, sit next to us. We're going to run the full regression pack through this software. You're going to see what happens. You're going to come back. You're going to fix the problem, come back, push it out in the little dev environment, dev shadow environment, and we would retest on the full source code. That sounds very familiar to some you know, modern day approaches to development. This whole idea of paired development or paired dev testing was something that Joe and I experimented with, you know, many years ago, and it proved extremely valuable because we were able to turn around software releases faster. Now we still needed this release candidate. So the circles there represent the number of pairs that we may have had, and then they would all check in their software, and we would produce a release candidate. From there, we would complete integration testing and release to production. Now, just because I show this illustration doesn't necessarily mean that this has to be success, right? Certainly, you can look at the integration testing box. I mean, imagine this model, but imagine it 2 or 3 years later. This is where we can't be complacent as an industry as well. How do we even improve and make this more efficient as a model? This is step one. This is what we accomplished. If we were to take this same diagram and a year or so later, you know, wanted to take it and deconstruct it even further, we would certainly try to move integration testing closer and closer to the origination of software to make it even more efficient over time. But this is as far as we got in this particular case study. The next case study is a bit more involved. You know, organizationally, the problem statement was that the entire dev shop was moving to adopt DevOps. Now, what does that mean? It's different for everyone, you know, honestly. Especially when you're talking about thousands of employees all wanting to march in a certain direction. The best that we could possibly achieve would be some architectural governance. But at the end of the day, it was the responsibility of the development managers and development teams to actually implement DevOps. So as a central team of testers, you know, what was our response to it? Typically, well, anyways, let me follow the slide. So the SDLC tie-in is design, implementation, verification, and maintain. So really, this was going to be very impactful across the entire SDLC. And again, as a test manager, I do not walk into this problem statement and say, let me wait for someone to tell me what to do. Right? I'm looking at how do I get on board with this and actually drive change. Or we should all be viewed as the test experts. So we should all come to the table, be presenting with the problem, and be able to, in our own organization, speak up and help drive some of the some of the ways and the means in which this is going to be rolled out. Otherwise, those decisions are going to be made for you. So our approach was a multi-year transaction, needing to involve all stakeholders. Eliminate manual testing. Sounds easy, right? Build out continuous deployment, invest in environment stability, and transition all application test responsibilities to an AD role. I'll tell you right now, we didn't get all that accomplished. And it may be hours and hours and years ahead, and we may never get to complete. But any good vision has to be really presented in a means that I think makes you and forces you to stretch. So what do we do? Well, this is the traditional, looks very waterfall-y, doesn't it? Before, this is actually agile in our group. Just a lot of different stakeholders. Design, build, all owned by dev. Then there was application testing, that was your traditional QA team. And then end-to-end was an operations function, the business owned UAT, and then finally, products get out to production. What's interesting in a very large scale firm, I think senior management, they'll fly to Google, to Amazon, to learn about great best practices like the newest, hottest things, technologies, or approaches to software development. Try to bring it back to organizations that are tens of thousands of people large, with systems and applications that have been around for many years, and try to impose that same standard across their organization. And it's extremely challenging. Not impossible, but you have the limits, right? And you just have to know where in the SDLC and how in the SDLC you can make efficiency gains to try to get closer to that desired end state of yours. So what we did was, we said, okay, well, hey, we're going to actually move the design phase, the build phase, and the test phase into the development function. QA, for now, would own the end-to-end testing, because traditionally, at least in banking, the operations group are not testers. They are business-minded people. So we shift left the responsibilities of testing to the developer. It's important that we not do this all at once, because certainly there's major cultural changes that have to be undertaken with a major transformation like this. What we've done is, and I'll get into a little bit more what we did in a second here, but our key goal here was to try to reduce the amount of time that it took us to deliver software and find defects far much earlier in the process. It's real common, core, basic testing in my mind. That's something that we've been talking about for years, how to find defects sooner in the dev lifecycle. So there's nothing really crazy about this. It's just, you got to do it. And the last thing you want to do is just shift people over into these groups and expect it to be done. So we ran a multi-year project, multi-year program that trained our staff, that upgraded staff, that moved staff actually into dev. And now we have QA resources who have moved into the development function and are developing software. That's how we were able to achieve it. So all developers in this case are responsible for development, building, designing, and testing software. And some of the best testers are the people, the testing experts are the ones that came from our team traditionally. Now if you go to the next one, Joe. So, I say desire, but we may not want to get this far because there is a risk reward. Is it really worth all the extra effort and the cultural shifts that we would have to undertake in order to gain that much more efficiency? That question is yet to be answered. But you could take this model even further, right? If your applications, if your software understood the contract points, in theory, you should be able to build, test, deploy, support, all in one go, right? But there are organizational challenges, especially at larger firms, that may prevent that from happening, regulatory concerns and others. But that's some future thought. All right. Now, if I look ahead at the staff transformation, keep going. There we go. So what do? This is year one. So if you look at the skill sets of folks in our group, we started with a very manually intense group of testers. And over time, we've changed the profile, the mix. So we literally upgraded, trained staff to become more technical. Now, my definition of technical testers would be someone who can write scripts, whether Perl, Python, Shell, whatever it may be, but they're able to write scripts and understand databases, write stored procedures and such. So they have a development mindset. They understand enough of development, coding, technology in order to be useful, I think, in this environment. We maintained a pretty steady footprint of subject matter experts because at the end of the day, we are testing. We have to write test cases. We have to understand the products we're testing, the business that we're testing. So it's important that we keep a core set of subject matter experts. And then the environment engineers, now that's something different. We're only as good really as our environments in many cases. So we made a self-funded investment to hire people who, and we run today an environment engineering team that does nothing but actually look after, or like a production-like environment, production-like group, but for lower tier environments. And then finally, this spot in red is our investment in the DevOps transformation. So if I have $1 million worth of budget, I transitioned about 33% of that into dev so that they could hire people who are maybe better suited, who are cultural changes, who are going to be driving cultural changes across the development shop. Because we recognize that simply shifting people back and forth may just exacerbate the problem. We have to bring in good talent, new talent. We talked about recruiting in the previous session, right? How do we bring in the talent that will transform groups that are very traditional waterfall, right? You just can't always expect that it's going to be done internally. You attend a conference or two, you read a book or two, and all of a sudden the teams, get it and deliver it. This is tested, right? We drove this. The test organization drove this transition. We recognize as testers that we needed to make an investment in these DevOps roles, people who are going to come in and really transform the dev group for this to be successful. So we have skin in the game, if you will. So that's kind of how it all worked out. Less logic. So some lessons learned. I mean, I was a bit all over the place here. I do want to give a few minutes for questions. But let me just go through again. These are some of the lessons that I've learned over time, and I hope that maybe some of them, you'll make note of. Hopefully this somehow you can take even one of these bullet points back and make some changes within your organization. So I say anchor yourself on core SDLC knowledge and principles. Break every challenge down to how it fits into the SDLC. Don't be complacent. Keep driving forward. I mean, unfortunately, and I got some folks from my group here who can probably, agree with me here. But with this whole transformation that you saw just previously, the biggest challenge was changing the culture and to try to get staff to buy into it, as opposed to looking at it as some way of eliminating roles. The more that people bought into it, the more successful. But there was certainly a large population of folks who just couldn't see it. They didn't have that open enough mind to be able to buy into what we were trying to do here. Have a strategy and a platform for innovation. So again, you own testing. Whether you have a small shop or big shop, you should be driving the test model, right? And if you're not, you need to get into the room where you are, or be at the table where you are. Be mindful of, but not distracted by the latest trends. You should be looking to be the trendsetter yourself. So simply take a lot of, in my mind, best practices and make them your own, right? What's going to work? There's no one-size-fits-all solution. So don't force one to be. Don't force one to be. Establish clear measures of success that have buy-in from leadership. So again, just because we had 900 test cases yesterday and we have a plan to get to 1,000 means absolutely nothing to most people, right? What matters is how that's going to impact delivery. how that's going to impact the business. So I know we like to throw as an industry a lot of numbers around, right? This percentage, that percentage, defect leakage, blah, blah, but how does that translate into real business value? It's not impossible. You just need to figure out in your organizations how to take the role of testing and make it into you're not so much you're not a cost, but you're also not a profit driver either. You're kind of somewhere in between, right? How do you get there as a group? How do we get there as a group? And then finally, embrace a culture which empowers employees to innovate. Hold innovation sessions. Get people to sit around a room, talk about how they could do their job or where they see the future going. If you must, bring people together for conferences and encourage folks to get involved and to read and to bring what they've got. Have them experiment, have them fail. I heard a comment earlier about how you often will learn more in failure than you will in success. So the more that we as managers can invest in our staff, empower them, I think that will be a big cultural change.